Hello, I'm Michael Pierce, and this is The Human Condition. Our topic today is food freedom. Is this freedom from food or is this freedom with food? Well, it goes both ways. Many of you have discovered freedom through food by expanding your palate. You've decided you've got a new diet, you're getting some new foods, you're adding new foods, and you're excited to cook, you're excited to prepare food, and you're excited to really become kind of like your own home chef. It's a lot of fun. And it takes up a lot of time, and it often will help us get rid of other addictions by switching our focus to cooking and shopping and eating food, and that's wonderful. However, I'd like today to tell you about another side of food freedom that is something that comes up in the world of carnivore and keto that may not be talked about very much. And that's the opposite. That's the idea that when a person takes a diet and becomes very restrictive in their diet, in that they take away a lot of foods and focus on a certain category of foods like meat, animal foods, fat, and eggs, that kind of stuff. When they do whatever their modification is for their version of carnivore or elimination diet or keto diet, they find an amazing liberation from all the time and effort that it takes to prepare food. You're shopping less, you're cooking less, you're thinking about food less. It's very easy to have food that you know you like that tastes good and know that it's there and you've got it in the freezer and you've got it ready to cook and you've got it thawing in the fridge. You've got your recipes, you've done all your shopping, and you know what you're going to be eating for the week. That gives you a lot of extra time to do other things. I have to say that in my life, sometimes as a trained chef and a doctor, I really love to cook. I want to cook, I want to prepare, I want to shop, I want to plan, I want to have parties, I want to do all that stuff. But other times, I'd rather focus on something else. I'd rather focus on projects. I'd rather focus on writing or research or planning or studying. Or I'd take a trip somewhere. And I don't really want to spend a lot of time cooking and preparing and planning food. I want to figure out how to do it really easy and really simple. And this may sound boring to some of you, and it may sound like I'm taking away the pleasure of life. But if a person is getting their pleasure of life from just their food, that's a real problem. If your pleasure comes from the carbohydrates that you're eating and from the sugars and from the snacks, that could be a real problem. So, what we're talking about really today is trying to cut down on that problem, trying to make it easier. Now, sometimes there's people that have eating disorders, and that's okay. You've got a problem where sometimes with orthorexia, you are focused on food too much. And so we try not to steer people toward perpetual calorie counting and weighing food with a scale and weighing themselves, and we discourage that in eating disorders. I think that's very important and very wise, and it's a lesson we can take about food preparation too. We don't want the eating disordered patient, which I have a lot of experience with successfully treating with alternative methods and some traditional methods. The patient that has orthorexia or is very, very obsessed about their food and obsessed about their weight and obsessed about their calories and their weight and all those things, that person can benefit from not having to think so much. They do the calculation once, they shop for the food in bulk, they store it, they freeze it, they plan for how to cook it, and they and their family can very easily spend extremely little time shopping for and cooking and preparing food and eating food and cleaning up after because they've got it down. And I found this quite liberating. So food is nourishment and food is fun, but food can also be an addiction. There's a set of neurons that fire from the ventral or front part of the midbrain or mesencephalon to the frontal lobe deep, and that is a dopamine pathway. It fires to from the ventral tegmentum to the nucleus accumbens. The nucleus accumbens is kind of the addiction center that we know of for people. And this center can be really locked into food. It can lock into all kinds of things. And in fact, it can lock into non-substance abuse, where a person becomes addicted to a thing, a task, or an action instead of an object. So instead of being addicted to a drug or a food or a substance, they're addicted to, say, gambling or some activity. They might be addicted to running. They might be addicted to, anything that shows addictive and dangerous behavior for their life. So that particular nucleus needs to be satisfied by nutrients. And one of the things that we want to do for that nucleus is to make sure that the patient has plenty of nutrients without anti-nutrients. And that's, again, what a highly restrictive diet that might be frowned upon by a therapist or frowned upon by a dietitian because it's too restrictive. It's actually very, very simple. You're eating meat, you're eating eggs, you're eating carnivore, you're eating keto, you're eating lots of fat. Whatever your version of low carb diet is, if you restrict the anti-nutrients and increase the high quality protein and high quality nutrients, you might find that the brain can fire a lot better with the same circumstances in life. Now, obviously, sometimes we have to change our circumstances. And those of us that are into light biology, which I hope is a lot of you, will realize that we've got to mitigate our blue light exposure, our artificial blue light exposure from screens and from lights and from all the stuff around us and from phones and from Bluetooth. Even Bluetooth like my microphone, unfortunately. But I don't spend very much time in front of this microphone. So my exposure time is very low. In addition, we need to add lots of sunlight exposure. We don't want to be exposing ourselves just to LED lights and other types of lights. Even incandescent lights don't hold a candle, no pun intended, to the sun. Incandescent lights are great because they've got a red spectrum, but they're not near as broad or as powerful or as deep or as strong as the sun. So it's free. Go out in the sun. It's really important to consider that we need both ultraviolet and infrared light from the sun, and we need some blue light from the sun too. So consider getting your morning blue light and your noontime blue light from the sun, but mixed properly within a spectrum of red and blue and ultraviolet and violet and purple. All those different lights are extremely important if you've studied light biology, which this lecture is not about. So when it's time to prep food, one of the things that helps us a lot is to know that if you do one of these typical diets, most people, after a period of adjustment, and that period can be from days to weeks, they go through a liberation where they don't have gas, they don't have changing in stools, they don't have diarrhea and alternating constipation, they don't get gas and bloating, they don't get flatulence and burping, they don't get reflux esophagitis, they don't get heartburn. All that stuff usually goes away on these diets. Now, if it doesn't, you may have to talk to a doctor and you may have to consider things like zinc supplements and other types of supplements that may be involved in the production of stomach acid or in the production of healthy bile. Because after a person's been eating all those anti-nutrients for a lifetime, they often don't produce healthy bile, and they need to rehabilitate their pancreas and their liver and their gallbladder. Now, remember, even if a person has lost their gallbladder, there still is enough ductwork, there still is enough volume inside the pipes of your liver and your pancreas to store bile for a meal. So don't think that if you've lost your gallbladder or had it taken away by surgery, that there is no hope for you. That's just not true, and it never has been true. That's been kind of a myth. The idea is a myth that, once you start down the process of medical intervention and medical drugs, that you're trapped there forever, and they want you to be. The industry wants you to be trapped there, and they want you to perpetuate a low-fat diet because now you can't digest fat anymore because you've had your gallbladder removed. Well, that's not true. So the simple diets that we talk about are freeing us to have time to devote to other pursuits. I would like to see a lot of people that are so busy healing just stop focusing on healing. Stop focusing on going to the darn chiropractor and the therapist and the neurofeedback person, and really pare that down to as little as possible. Spend as much time in the sun as possible. Spend as much time on your hobbies as possible, and really focus on doing what you need to do for yourself in the smallest time possible so you can live. You need to be with your family. You need to pursue recreation. Spend a lot of time off. I call it Zen time, where you're just doing nothing, contemplating your navel. That concept, I think, is extremely important. Now, there's also taste versus satiety. Many times when a person starts on this diet, they don't have as much variety of taste, but they get this satiety. Satiety means satisfaction or fullness and feeling like you've got what you need. Sometimes when a person sits down and has the first time in their life, they have like 2 pounds of meat in a day for an adult male, for example. It may be somewhat less for some people, but an adult carnivore male, it's not uncommon to have 2 pounds of meat a day, and maybe that's it. When they do that, they feel so satisfied that they've eaten enough protein, enough trace minerals, enough fats, enough saturated fat, and hopefully if they've had maybe an organ meat pill in there somewhere, or some soup or food that has organ meats in it, then they might feel more satisfied than they've ever felt from food in their lives. So consider that idea that you might cut down on taste variety, but you'll increase satiety and satisfaction and the feeling of really being full and really not needing to eat until the next day. In fact, a lot of people on these diets, including myself, can eat 1 or 2 meals a day. So that's a really exciting thing. It cuts down on shopping and it makes it much easier to freeze food and to pack food into a freezer, to get more into your freezer because you're not packing low nutrient density vegetables, you're packing in high nutrient density meats. You're buying eggs, hopefully fresh. You may be boiling those eggs or cooking them raw, cooking them from raw on the pan. So that idea of being able to freeze and thaw for later, and then have a schedule where you thaw and you have things ready, because it takes a bit of time to thaw meat properly. You don't want to just set it out on the counter. That's not food safe. You want to thaw it overnight or a couple days overnight by moving it from the freezer to the refrigerator. Now, there are ways to thaw food from the freezer, to thaw meat from the freezer rapidly, but it involves running water and all kinds of stuff. And you've got a 4-hour window where you really don't want to let that food, pockets in that food thaw and other pockets stay frozen because of food safety. So bear in mind that the safest way to thaw your frozen meat is to put it in the fridge for a day or two and really be sure that it's completely thawed out and no longer frozen when it's in that fridge. And then you can ideally bring it to room temperature on the countertop in a short period of time, 20, 30 minutes, and let it come to room temperature and then cook it at room temperature. Meat cooks better at room temperature than it does at refrigerator temperatures. So it's better to not take it right out of the fridge and cook it if you can. I like people to consider reheating their food in iron or copper skillets. I think that it's important to use iron and copper cookware. We need to get back to that. I use a great deal of different types of cookware, but I don't use Teflon and I don't use any kind of nonstick coating. It's important to learn how to use enameled cookware. It's important to learn how to use iron and cast iron and copper and steel, because if you use enough oil, especially saturated fat, you'll be able to get a nice smooth pan surface and be able to flip your food very easy without it sticking. And that requires using, again, saturated fat as a lubricant on that pan. And again, I want to really enforce that light is extremely important. I use carnivore diets as an elimination diet and as a lifestyle. I use keto diets as an elimination diet and a lifestyle. But it's really important to know that I'm not that strict in some cases when a person's getting enough sunlight. It's really important to visit the work of Jack Kruse and Alexis Cowan and some of the others out there that have been really good about studying light and helping us understand that the more light you get, the less strict you have to be with your diet. And that means sunlight. That doesn't necessarily mean light bulbs. Now, we do interventions where we use photobiomodulation and light bulb therapies to help people with brain problems and other organ problems, and that's a good tool. But please remember that nothing replaces the sun. And the more sun you get, and the closer to the equator that you live, and the lower altitude that you are, the more varied a diet can be. That is my talk on carnivore, keto, and low-carb food freedom.